Hello and welcome to BookBeat, the place for all things literary. I'm your host, Sue Ellen Zagrabelny, and today we have as our guest Chris Bauer, author of Those Three Words. And Chris, that title was a little deceptive.
Yeah.
So tell me.
Yes, those three words. Well, some people, when you say those three words, they might automatically think, I love you. But for the purpose of the title of this book, was those words for me meant you are pregnant. And I heard those words for the first time when I was just 18 years old. I was a freshman at college, so excited to be starting my college career, and then learned that I was pregnant. And so those three words were really scary for me. But in the end, ultimately, those three words also meant it's a girl, and I love you. And so there were many, many positive things about those three words as well.
Perfect. What led you to write this memoir?
I have been working on this off and on for many, many years. My daughter is now 33 years old, and so I kept a journal when I was pregnant with her, and I kept, did some writing therapeutically just to help myself understand things, and it's always good to get things out. So I had a good basis for it. And then for me, it was really, it was a bucket list, like I want to tell this story because I felt it was a really important story to tell. I do still feel that way about the importance of choice. I'm glad that I had options and that I could take time and figure out what was the right option for me. So I wanted to tell that, and then I wanted to just talk about the gift of adoption and how wonderful my story ended up. I could never have imagined it being so wonderful. My daughter is now a big part of my life, and have a great relationship with her parents who raised her and their family. And so it was just a story that I felt I wanted to tell.
Okay. I noticed in reading the memoir that you used some techniques that fiction writers use, and specifically the use of time and the use of place. Can you talk a little bit about that, how that came in?
Yeah. I had an editor that was really helpful with helping me talk about and describe place and, details of things about, my dorm room and my home and South Dakota where I grew up. That setting is really important to the book because it's such a big part of who I am growing up in South Dakota. And so I just, really took a lot of time making sure that I was communicating those things about time and place to really bring the reader along with me and feel like they were right there.
You accomplished that, let me tell you.
Thank you.
Would you read from your book? I was thinking specifically of chapter 1. I think it would give our audience a real flavor of this book.
Okay, sure. I'm happy to do that. All right, this is chapter 1, and it's late September 1984. Overdose warning. My index finger landed on those two words. I tilted the box to reduce the fluorescent light's glare as it flickered across the small typeface. Once the words came into focus, I scanned them quickly. Tylenol PM relieves your pain fast so you can fall asleep and feel refreshed after a good night's rest. But I didn't want an overdose warning. I wanted an overdose advice. I wanted to know what it would take so that I could sleep for an eternity. I would need to take more than just Tylenol to be sure it worked, so I decided I would combine the pills with NyQuil. Yes, together those should create my little annihilation cocktail. But would buying these two products together look suspect at the checkout? The cashier could ask, "Hey girl, are you planning to kill yourself?" And then I could say, "Yes, you a-hole, I am. I'm pregnant and I'm desperate, and this is the solution that causes the least pain for everyone in the long run." And I'd say it's none of your business. One by one, I took the packages off the shelf, 2 of each, and placed them gently in the red shopping bag draped across my left arm. "Excuse me," a middle-aged lady suddenly startled me. She smiled and nodded at me. I stepped aside so she could reach out and take her own box of sleep aids from the shelf. I was sure she was really going to use hers to sleep and not to kill herself, but I guess you never know. As I moved over for her, I reached down inside my soul and pulled out a smile in return. I hadn't smiled for days, but this woman made me think of my mom, whose gentle face entered my mind like an uninvited but welcome guest. I meandered through the drugstore aisles. Before now, I'd never thought much about the number of products that were available to solve your problems. There are products to take away body odor, products to make your skin soft, products to get rid of zits and stop bleeding. There were tablets to freshen your breath and capsules to make your headache go away. There were pills to make you sleep and even to kill yourself if you wanted. But there was nothing to make a pregnancy disappear. As I passed the plethora of feminine hygiene supplies, I thought of the pretty pink box of tampons that sat unopened in my dorm room. It had taunted me over the past few weeks, especially this morning. I thought of the many times over the years I'd hated having to open those boxes and having to deal with the monthly cycle and hassle of a period. Now opening that box would seem like I was opening a very special gift. I moved on from the tampons to the chips. I stood in a daze in front of the Doritos and Fritos and Old Dutch potato chips and other unhealthy snacks. The bags lounged in their steel racks, just waiting to be picked up. The Fritos looked good. They always look good, so I grabbed a bag, placing it strategically into my basket to cover the boxes of Tylenol and NyQuil. I also grabbed some Doritos. What the heck, I may as well eat all I want. I've been dieting for years, most of my life, really. Another curse of being a girl and a childhood gymnast at that. As I approached the checkout counter, the collage of women's magazines reinforced the ideal body image that had bombarded me most of my life. Headlines blare, "Lose 10 pounds in 2 weeks. Get a flat tummy fast. Thinner thighs in 30 days. None of that mattered anymore. The guy at the checkout counter was about my age, and I was relieved that he didn't seem fazed by my strange combination of items. I threw in a Toblerone chocolate bar at the last minute to add to the mix. "Thanks," I said, avoiding his eyes. I didn't want this guy to feel bad later on when the authorities figure out he was the one who sold me the ingredients for my permanent nightcap. Plastic bag clutched tightly in my hand, I headed back to the outdoor mall area of downtown Mankato, Minnesota. I took a seat on the wooden bench that dotted the sidewalk and dug my Marlboro Lights out of my backpack. It was about my 10th cigarette of the day, and it wasn't even noon. I lit up and took a deep, long drag. God, I hope this is the right way to do this. This is not something I can screw up. I don't want to screw it up again. But I was damned either way. Thou shalt not kill, the commandment said. Nowhere did it specifically say thou shalt not kill yourself. But the nuns had made it clear. If you do that, you will burn in hell. But what made them the experts? Hell, the church didn't even respect them. Why should I? Maybe a gun would be a better choice than pills. There were plenty at home, as I came from a family of hunters. I'd pictured myself back at home, unlocking the gun cabinet and taking a shotgun from the rack. I'd sneak into my bedroom, position myself on the bed with the yellow and green daisy bedspread. Then I'd pull the trigger. It would be fast. It would be a sure thing. But it would be so awful for whoever would find me, and unfortunately that person would most likely be my mom. She was always home and always there for us. I put my head in my hands and rubbed my temples, careful not to burn my hair with my cigarette. No, I couldn't do that. My mom was so nice and so sweet. I could not do that to her. To find her baby like that would be awful. Red blood and gray matter with bits of blonde hair splattered across the beautiful daisy bedspread. I took another deep drag of my cigarette and looked up. The sign someplace else hung there, laughing at me. Just last week, my new friends and I had been to someplace else, one of the more happening bars in downtown. We were laughing, dancing, talking, flirting. We'd been at the top of the world that night, the same as every night since school had begun. It was a dream come true, being at college and on my own. Now, here I was near the same spot, this time at bottom. In just a few weeks, I had tumbled from standing on the high board of life to lying at the bottom of the pool. Just last week, I was a freshman in love with my new life, and now I sat here wondering how many sleeping pills I should take to end my life. I'd already sorted through the options. Option 1, give up college, get married, live in Mitchell, be a mom. Option 2, have the baby and be a single parent. Live with my parents in a town I had so desperately wanted to leave. Option 3, have an abortion and don't tell anyone, ever. Go on with your life. And option 4, grow the baby, have the baby, and give it to some strangers to raise. But none of these options seemed right. It also didn't seem right that I was having to make this decision at all. I had used birth control and was surprised that this happened. And I had not slept with him that much, especially not compared to all my friends. But here I was, which is how I ended up with option 5.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thank you. What was option 5?
So option 5 was taking my life. That was the last option, and thank God I didn't take that option. But I did, I was just distraught and devastated that I was having to face this really difficult decision. And that's one of the, the reasons that I felt it was important to talk about having choice and choices in this book, is because it is such a personal decision and has a monumental impact on your life. And I that's just not something to take lightly.
Absolutely. Who were those in your support system, and how did they respond to your news when you told them? And what about as the time passed?
Yes. Well, for the first several weeks, I kept a lot of this inside. I did tell my boyfriend and a really close friend of mine, and then I did come close to terminating the pregnancy. I thought that was the option for me, and ultimately decided that was not right for my situation. And then I ended up telling my mother and my sister, and it was actually my 19th birthday. On my 19th birthday, I sat at home with my mom crying on the couch, telling her that I was pregnant. And she was wonderful and loving, and she just said, I love you, and we'll figure it out. So I feel blessed to have a family like that was so open and caring. And then my sister, she came home a little later, and we sat down and talked, and she offered to have me come live with her. She was living out in Utah and teaching school, and she offered to have me come live with her, and was just super supportive and wonderful. So they were really my rocks through all of this. My sister then ended up being my birthing coach and helped me bring my daughter into the world, and I just am forever grateful for her for being in my life like that and being such a big part of my life. And my mom is no longer with us. She passed away almost 4 years ago, and that's one thing that this has been so wonderful to have this published and be out talking. And I just wish my mom could hold it in her hands, because she was a huge lover of books and words, and was such a big part of my journey.
Oh, it's wonderful that you had that kind of support. It makes such a difference.
Absolutely.
When you're going through a crisis, to have people you can count on.
Absolutely.
You acknowledge anxiety and depression in this book. How did you handle them through your pregnancy and after?
When I was in high school, I think I struggled with anxiety and depression, and people didn't talk about that then. And I think, that played a role in a lot of things. And then I had, was, I think, sad a lot through my pregnancy, knowing that I would be placing my baby with another family and making an adoption plan for her. And I knew that I would be sad and feel an emptiness, which I did. But after I had her, I went back to college, and I kind of just jumped into my college life and buried a lot of those emotions. And so it's been good to have them out in the book, and that has been good with dealing with some of my emotions around this. But as far as like anxiety and depression, I am big into yoga and walking and breathing exercises is how I try to stay calm and keep those things at bay.
And you had said that the writing was therapeutic for
Oh,
you.
absolutely. It really was. And I kept a journal when I was pregnant with Katie. So I had, 9 months a year of journaling. And then I kept all the letters that that I wrote to Cindy, Katie's mom, and then she would write me back. And so we just, had open, good communication, and that I saved all of that, and that was really big part of the book as well. But definitely, I think writing is therapeutic, just to get things out, for sure.
And what I saw in the book was therapy elevated. That you not only expressed your emotions, but you did it through good writing.
Thank you.
It that impressed me, because I have read other memoirs that it's really clear their therapy on the paper.
Sure.
That they haven't been crafted and honed.
Yeah.
And I'd like to ask you a little later about how you were able to do that
process. Sure.
And so I don't want to miss that. And I'm going to go back to the techniques that you used. Place seemed to play a big role in the book. Can you talk about the places that the book took place?
Yes. Well, it starts out in Mankato, Minnesota, where I was going to college, and another place is Mitchell, South Dakota, where I grew up. And it was I say a big small town, because it was about 11,000 people, which in South Dakota, that's one of the top 10 most populous towns, because there's, it's not a highly populated state. And just the growing up in that environment where you know the community, and as a kid you have these amazing freedoms, and just the people that support you and people you go to school with, and it was important that I let the reader have a flavor for that, because I think that's just big part of why I am who I am, and it was my not only my family but my community. And so I wanted to make sure I gave the reader a flavor of that. Then, of course, out in Utah is where I went to live with my sister and have my baby. And it was, a big change kind of culturally to go out to Utah. And I, really didn't know anybody but my sister. But I found great solace, like, in being out there and in the mountains. And so I tried to really describe that. And then back in Mankato, I've had people tell me that, from my hometown and from people I went to school with, that, oh my gosh, I felt like I was right there with you. So that makes me happy that I was able to really convey that real time and place. And just let the reader really be part of the story.
Yes, and it really moved the story along.
Thank you.
So that was impressive. Talk about the others who figure into this story. I'm particularly interested in Becky, your sister. But talk about the others as well.
Okay. So Becky is 6 years older than I am. And when we were young, we really did not get along that well, because I was an annoying little sister, I'm sure.
I was one too.
And, she was in high school and I was still in grade school. And so we weren't really close growing up. I mean, we did have our good times and such, but that's a big age gap. So we hadn't been particularly close, or weren't at the time that I, told her my situation, and she just opened her arms and, welcomed me into her life and her home. So that just speaks volumes about my sister. She's an amazing person. And I can't imagine my life without her. So she was there for the birth of my daughter, and just has been a great support system we have for each other. She, for a long time, lived in Maple Grove. She just recently moved to St. Louis Park, but we're in the same area, and our children grew up together, and feel really, really blessed to have a sister like that.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
What about some of the other people?
Okay, so big people in my life. Well, I did end up getting married then after college was done. I had a really wonderful career. I've always worked in marketing and communications, so I feel blessed that I love to write and that is part of my job on a day-to-day basis. So, but I married and then had 2 other children. I have 2 boys, and they were then, I think 3 and 6 or 4 and 7 when Katie came into our lives. And so we just, my kids are a huge part of my life. Those are the other characters in the story. But Dennis and Cindy, of course, are huge, and that is Katie's mom and dad. And they are wonderful people, and we have really, really deep love and respect for each other. And I think that's why this has always worked so beautifully. I entrusted them to raise my daughter and let them do that, but they always welcomed me, and I always felt that they loved me, and it was just they're just really good people, and I feel like I was fortunate that all the stars aligned, and they were the ones that were there to raise my daughter.
Yes, and talk a little bit about the open adoption. Our audience may not be acquainted with that term and that
Sure.
concept.
Yeah, and more open adoption is becoming the norm. In 1985, when I had Katie, it was relatively new, but essentially an open adoption, and there are many different ranges of open adoption. A lot of people now, they see the birth mom and the adoptive parents and the child get together on a regular basis. I even hear about it like almost weekly. Families get together, and so that's like really open. Mine was open in that I knew where Katie was. Dennis and Cindy knew where I was. We wrote back and forth and just kept in touch that way. But prior to the 80s, there were years where there was no information available, and the thought was that we're going to take this baby and give it a new home, and you just go on with your life. And I knew that I could not do that. That I couldn't, place my baby and have no idea where she was. So I am a big proponent of open adoption, and like I said, I think most people, that is the route that most people go nowadays. But I have I've been going to some adoption support groups, and I meet women that had babies 40 years ago that they weren't allowed to know anything, and the files were closed, and it's just heartbreaking because, of course, you love your child. You give birth to this child, you love it, and so more and more, though, with DNA testing and all of that, people are connecting with their children and children finding their parents. So there's been some really good stories along that way. But yeah, I would say the majority of adoptions now are open.
That is fascinating because I had been acquainted with some adoptions 40 years ago, and they were very closed and very judgmental and making it very hard on both sides, both the birth mother and the adoptive parents.
Yes.
It was really adversarial.
It was, and I feel, there was shame. I think birth mothers were, felt all this shame and guilt, and like they were the bad girls, and got sent away. And I'm so glad that has changed, and that women are being respected for being birth mothers, and it is a positive thing. So I'm glad to see that it's changed.
Yes, I am too. And you mentioned Cindy and Dennis, and you do keep in touch. Have you met them?
I have, yes. In fact, I won't tell all the details because I have to keep a few surprises.
Yeah,
if somebody
please
reads stuff.
do.
Yeah.
Please do.
But we didn't meet until Katie was an adult, so after she was 18. But then we've gone on vacations together. Katie got married, and my son, who at the time, I don't know, he was maybe 10 or 11, my oldest son walked Cindy and I down the aisle. He was the little usher walking the moms down the aisle at Katie's wedding, and then my youngest son was the ring bearer at her wedding. So I mean, we've had some really great life experiences together. But now, so they still live in Wisconsin, but my daughter lives in New Zealand.
Oh my goodness.
I know. It's a beautiful place to live and raise a family, but it's just far away.
Oh yeah, and you don't get there very often.
Yeah, it's really far away.
That's true. Did you choose to meet your daughter, or did she choose to meet you? How did that work?
So I really left it up to Katie and when she wanted to make that happen. She always knew that I was part of her life, or that that I was there when she was ready. And so, she grew up with a picture of me next to her bed. I mean, Dennis and Cindy were very, very open about the fact that, she had two mamas, and Mom, Chrissy was the one that was, you were in her tummy, and she always loved you. And so Katie always knew those things. And when she turned 18, she decided that she was ready. This was after she graduated from high school. And so she came and drove from Milwaukee to Maple Grove and met me and my boys and my entire family. And so it was just really, really special. So yeah, I left that up to her, that initial contact.
That's a great way to empower her.
Absolutely.
And that gives some choice to the child. Can you talk a little bit, you mentioned your sons. How old are they now?
My sons are now 19 and 22, and they're both out west for college. And so they were, was it 4 and 7 when they met Katie? And so they were at that beautiful age where acceptance, I mean, they just were, found out they had a sister, and they were like, oh my gosh, that's wonderful, I have a sister. And they just fell in love with her right away. And she was, there's always been big distance between my boys and Katie. Well, for a while she was close when she was in college, but since she's been in New Zealand, so that makes it a little more challenging. But we FaceTime as much as we can and make that connection. And when we were together in March, so they have a good relationship with their sister. Yeah.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
That is fabulous. Let's move a little bit to how you wrote this book. Did you write every day? Did you write in kind of spurts, or did you gather everything together and start typing and here comes a book?
Yeah, it was.
What was it like?
It was definitely spurts, and took me almost 30 years.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, I would work on it and then put it away and work on it. But when I first got serious about it was in the early 90s, and I took a class at the Loft Literary Center, which is a wonderful organization for people who don't know. It's just this great resource for writers. So they have workshops and classes, and all these amazing authors teach there. And so I took a class there and had a pretty good start on it. And then I got busy and was into my career, and then I had kids, and it was really hard to. And I know there are people that do that, work full time and raise kids and write books, but I was not one of them. So I mean, it was very sporadic then for a long while. And then when my boys were in grade school, I was freelancing, so I had my my own business out of my house, and I took time each day then during that period, and that's really when I got the book mostly done. And then I tried for years to get it published through a traditional publishing agency, which meant first getting an agent. So I queried all kinds of agents. I went back and forth and thought I was getting close, and then it would fall through. And so that was frustrating. But I think every author has gone through that rejection process. But I then ultimately decided that it was so important for me to complete this book that I self-published. And I worked with a company called Wise Ink Publishing here in the Twin Cities, and they are wonderful. They were a huge help and really make sure you have a professional book before you go to the printer.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
So Wise Ink. And did you have an editor at Wise Ink?
Yes, and even before I got to Wise Ink, I hired an editor. It was a woman I had taken a class through at the Loft, and she does coaching with writers. And so I worked with her, 6 to 12 months probably, where we were sending stuff back and forth, and she was really helping me put good structure to the story and telling me to add more details about place and things like that. So she was an amazing help to me. So by the time I got to Wise Ink, my manuscript was in pretty good shape. But the process then was that they hooked me up with a developmental editor, so somebody that looked at the structure and the story and said, you could cut this and you could add more here. So I ended up doing those things. I cut probably 10,000 words, which, it's always hard when you put all that effort into it and then you have to just hit delete. But
yeah, it's your babies.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to make them go away.
It's true, but it ultimately was all for the right reasons and helped the book. So then it went from developmental editing to line editing. So somebody's looking at each sentence. Then we went to proofreading, and then they connected me with the designer who did a fantastic job. So that was really fun. And then through the printing process. So they really hold your hand through the whole process. And it's been just so much fun. And the best thing is all the great people I've met. I've connected with so many people. So
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And you do have a website?
I do, yeah.
And what
Yeah.
is the...
Yep, it's authorcbauer.com, and that's CBAUER.com.
Okay.
Yep.
That's important to get information about the book.
Yep.
Okay. Are there other books in this pipeline?
I do have one I'm working on right now. It's a children's book that I actually wrote a draft of this years ago and then kind of scrapped it, and same idea, but I started over. So that is in the works. And then I also have an idea for another book that isn't on paper yet, but I've got some stories swirling in my brain. So I hope to get to that and soon.
Fiction?
And it's fiction, which would be very, very different for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will you go back to the Loft, do you think?
You know what? I am considering taking a class. I will, because I think I need help with that. And everybody needs an editor, someone to read and help them. It's just, I think, part of the writing process that you do need somebody who can look at it with fresh eyes, and things that you can't see if you've been working on it for decades, for example, or even not that long. But it's always good to have a good editor, and there I'm sure I will find good instructors that can help me with fiction.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we end the show today?
I would say, well, like I said, I've met a lot of people through this journey, and it's been really, really rewarding. And not only people who have connected with me because they have some stake in the adoption process, or they're involved with adoption in some way, shape, or form, but I've also had people reach out to me just that have struggled with things in life, addiction issues or relationship issues, and they've been so complimentary that I've been vulnerable and just said, this is my life, and it's wonderful, but it's not all pretty. Life has its ups and downs, and that is just part of the human experience. And so I think just knowing that life has its ups and downs, and my book is one of those stories, but there are many, many stories out there. And my mom told us this at a really hard time in our family. We lost my nephew to he died accidentally, and my mom said, "You should know that sadness stretches the heart, so there's more room for joy." And that was,
What a lovely
yeah, isn't that
saying.
beautiful? And that has really stayed with me since she told me that and told us, our family, that. And I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yes.
Yes.
You mentioned off camera that you volunteer for an organization. Could you talk about that a little bit,
Yes, I'd love
please?
to. The organization is called BELLIS, and it's BELLIS. It's a formerly the name was the Adoption Option Council of Minnesota, but they recently changed to BELLIS, which means beautiful. And this is a pro-adoption group. There's no religious affiliation, no political affiliation, and it is just about explaining and communicating about adoption, and also offering support to birth mothers and adoptive mothers and adoptive children, and really anybody in the adoption triad. And so this morning I spent my morning at a local high school talking to one of their child development classes about adoption. And just, there's a lot people don't know. So the organization is really about just educating about adoption and then providing support for people in the adoption community.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, it's been great.
And it's a local organization?
It is, based in Minneapolis, yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there are others like you that go out and talk about about their experiences and about what's available?
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's a fabulous resource.
Yes.
Before we end the show, is there anything else you'd like to add? Is there anything we haven't covered?
Well, I guess there is. If for any aspiring authors out there,
Okay.
don't give up. Keep writing. Keep doing it. It took me 30 years, and I finally have a book in my hands. And if it is your dream, you can do it. There are people to help you as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is so true.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you for joining us at BookBeat today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us at BookBeat, the place for all things literary. We look forward to seeing you next time.